Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to the Geek Suite. I'm your host, the one and only Kid Bean, and it's been a while, and I know I said I was going to do a bunch of stuff, and I didn't, and that's just life sometimes. I missed Disability Awareness Month video because of my disability. But I am back, and we're here to talk about stuff. As you can see, I'm clearly not in my current normal studio space, and my head is way down here because my tripod broke. So yeah, I'm up in, let's see if I can make this a little better, there. I'm up near Yosemite. There's fires, but not where we are. Just needed to get away for a little bit, so we went up to this cabin in the middle of nowhere where nobody's around because COVID. So yeah, it's been a nice way to get away and refresh and recoup because my infusion schedule got messed up again, as I mentioned in my post in last video. So I haven't really had a lot of energy. I've barely been able to get my work done for my normal job. I would love to do more videos, but they don't currently pay the bills at the moment. But yeah, so I've been a little under the weather. I'm feeling a little bit better, getting to rest and relax and take a few days off. And just because I haven't been talking to you on the internet doesn't mean I haven't been on the internet. And we gotta talk about the Inuyasha sequel because the internet is losing its damn mind. So this is gonna be Angry Nerd Rant time! And today's Angry Nerd Rant is gonna be, no, there's no way SESSHOUMARU and Rin had kids. Just, I would be genuinely shocked if that were the case. And I have some reasons for, I think, why that's not true. Some that are based in my knowledge of the film industry and trends that they've tried to do in the past that failed horribly, as well as just timeline stuff from the little information that they have given us about the series. So let's get into it. Okay, so the new Inuyasha series called Yashahime, Half Demon Princess, follows the story of Inuyasha and SESSHOUMARU's children. Inuyasha and Kagome, we're told that they have a daughter, who is the main character of the show. I'll put a picture of her here. And then SESSHOUMARU has two twin daughters as well. And I guess the plot of the story is that the twin daughters get separated when they're young children, and one of them, who has more of SESSHOUMARU's look, crawls through a tunnel and comes out at the Higurashi Shrine and is taken in by an adult Sota and raised there, and then eventually comes back through time traveling shenanigans as per usual. And then the other daughter, for some reason, it's unclear whether or not SESSHOUMARU raises her, but they tell us that she ends up working for Kohaku as a demon hunter. And Kohaku is the key to the internal reasons why Rin is not their mother. Now, they do give, or at least they say that, oh, she looks just like Rin. She doesn't look like SESSHOUMARU. I don't know that that means that she looks like Rin. She has black hair and brown eyes, and like 90% of the human characters in this show have black hair and brown eyes because Japan. Putting that aside, some reasons why SESSHOUMARU did not have children with Rin. Rin is not the baby mama. Oh, I was actually shocked that they said SESSHOUMARU had kids at all, because we don't see a lot of sexual tension between him and any of the other characters in the show. I know a lot of people, self included, shipped him and Kagura during the original series because they had some chemistry together, but I think their chemistry was just that they were both kind of cold and bitchy, and it was cute for the few scenes that they were in together, but it didn't show that he was into her. And I had actually, for the longest time, considered him to be an asexual character, and I was kind of disappointed when they revealed that he had children, because it kind of takes away from it, and we don't have enough asexual representation, even though he is, you know, the cool, unfeeling sociopath that we all know and love. It was still, I think it's important to have those characters in media, but moving on. We don't really see him have any interaction with anyone else, but it's very clear that he at least had babies with someone, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not asexual. Case in point, Stannis Baratheon is largely believed to be asexual and only had relations with his wife, I'm trying not to get demonetized, out of duty. He was driven by duty, not by any attraction or sexual orientation of any kind. Barring that, back to Kohaku. So we have pictures of Kohaku as he is in the show, much like we get the little character snapshots for the children of Inuyasha and SESSHOUMARU. And he's older than he was in the original show, duh. But he's not old. He doesn't even really appear to be middle-aged. I wouldn't put him past 30. Now, yes, it is hard to gauge the age of animated characters as their features do not typically change all that much. He still needs to be recognizable, but we don't see any graying of the hair or any wrinkles or signs that he might be middle-aged like we've seen in some of the other, NPC type characters that the original cast interacted with. He looks to maybe be somewhere a little bit older than Miroku was in the original series, so I would put him somewhere between 20 and 30. 35 would be pushing it. So looking at that and looking at the main characters, our cast, our children of Inuyasha and SESSHOUMARU, they all appear to be at maybe Kohaku's age to Kagome's age in the original show, so that's somewhere between 12 and 15. Actually, no, we know how old SESSHOUMARU's children are because they're separated, I believe, at the age of 4 or 5 in that fire that we are revealed in the information we have so far. So we do know that 10 years pass between when Toa goes through the tunnel and arrives at the Higurashi shrine and when she then has to return to the feudal era for plot reasons. So SESSHOUMARU's kids, I believe, are either 14 or 15. And Inuyasha's daughter looks to be about the same age, maybe a year or two apart. I'm sure they put it somewhere, but for the life of me, I can't remember. And I'm not going to keep pausing this recording to look it up because I don't have my computer, because there's no Wi-Fi here, because middle of nowhere getaway, much Twin Peak vibes. So for them to be 15 and for Kohaku to be about 30, and Kohaku is, I believe, about 12 in the original series, so that means, let's do some maths, that about 20 years have passed. So in order for 20 years to have passed and the children to be 15, SESSHOUMARU would have had to have had children about 5 years after the end of the series. So at the end of the series, Kagome is 18, and when she comes back through the well and they get married, whatever. So if they have children 5 years after that, Kagome would be 23 when she has children. Young, but not obscenely so. Rin, let's say she's 5 when SESSHOUMARU first finds her, and then 3 years for the end of the series, that would put her at 8. So she would have had to have been impregnated at 12 and give birth to those twins at 13. And while yes, there are cases of this happening in the world, it was very uncommon for girls to start puberty at that age in that era, though not unheard of, and ew, she's still a literal child. I sincerely doubt that even if it were feasible for her, which is highly unlikely, the average age of the onset of puberty is 14 to 15, so she is still a year or two shy of this being feasible. That's way, way too young, even by medieval standards. Yes, it was common at the time for people to have children at around the age of 15, but even in feudal Japan, having sex with a 12-year-old is a no-no. So while SESSHOUMARU was not a good guy by any stretch of the imagination, I don't think they're going to make him a pedophile. And that brings us to the external reasons I do not think that Rin is the mother of SESSHOUMARU.'s children. While, yes, she's the only human that he seems to tolerate being around, again, I don't think he's having children with 12-year-olds. I just don't. But looking at the film and TV and anime industry as a whole, while I know that anime is sort of infamous for sexualizing very young girls in their animated series, given that this is being catered to not just a Japanese but a global audience, they do often take Western influence into account when making these types of creative choices. And that's giving that phenomena a very gracious use of the word. Looking at attempts in recent history, because let's go back to the original series ended in 2009-2010 and was very much at a global audience at the time. When it was released in 1998, it was particularly just for Japan, and then became wildly popular with American audiences and was featured on Adult Swim, which was how I came into familiarity with it as a youngster. But now, when covering the touchy subject of adult-child relationships that have sexual undertones or overt sexual romantic relationships in fantasy, it must be done in a very specific set of parameters to a very specific audience with the right context in order for it to not be a flaming dumpster pile. And there are two cases that I can immediately think of that are widely popular and relevant in American culture that most of you will have heard of, one being a successful implementation of this relationship and one being a dumpster fire failure. The successful example is Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. In Interview with a Vampire, we have our main cast of Louis, Lestat, and Claudia. Louis and Lestat are adults. Louis being a recently turned vampire in his 20s, Lestat being much older, but still looking of an age with Louis. And then we have young Claudia, who is about 8 when we first meet her. Now, when we meet her, Claudia is starving, clinging to her dead mother, who's died from plague. Louis is starving, feeds on her, and leaves her to die. Lestat turns her, which is a big no-no as established within the canon of the story, to not turn children, and presents her as a gift, to Louis. When the relationship starts, it starts off as a familial relationship, paternal type setting where they're both her fathers. And as the story progresses, it is Anne Rice's intent to show Claudia as a living lesson as to why immortal children are a bad idea. Because as Claudia grows older, she remains in a child's body, but her mind matures, and so she starts developing adult feelings for the men in her life, namely Louis. She keeps trying to pursue a romantic relationship with him, and it starts turning sexual, and it's very uncomfortable for Louis. And they have to address this, and it's addressed as when Lestat explains it to him that this is why we don't turn children. They're left in these teeny tiny little doll bodies, but their minds continue to age as ours would, and thus it creates a problem. And this framing is why it's successful. The person directing the romantic and sexual attention is the person with the child's body, but an adult's mind, towards the male adult, and it is met with discomfort. This is why this portrayal of this relationship is okay, because it's showing the horror of a child-adult relationship within a fantasy setting. At first, the relationship is cute and innocent, and then it starts to take on these romantic and sexual undertones that are not reciprocated, and it creates awkward tension in the relationship. Louis still loves and cares for Claudia and tries to maintain those parental boundaries with her, but it's very difficult to do when she starts reaching, 100 years old, and she still looks like an 8-year-old. She's like, because I don't know about you, I'm not even 100, I'm not even 30, but I'm still over here like, I'm a grown-ass woman, don't tell me what to do. So I can only imagine how frustrating that would be for someone like Claudia. Now, that being the successful case of portraying that type of relationship in mass media, let's look at the biggest, most popular case I could think of off the top of my head of an unsuccessful portrayal of this relationship, and that would be Twilight. I know vampires and demons are not the same, but the lifespan discrepancy between them and humans and the supernatural nature is close enough that we're going with it. So, for those who may or may not be aware or have blocked those 4 horrific movies from your memory, let's quick recap of the main cast of this weird relationship in Twilight. We have our romantic triangle of Edward, Jacob, and Bella, where Edward is a vampire, Jacob is a werewolf, and Bella is... Now, throughout the course of, I hate to call it a story, but throughout the course of the series, Bella has unsure feelings between her and Edward and Jacob feels something for her, but it's not quite what he thought. And then once Bella has a baby, it's realized that it wasn't really Bella that he loved, it was her infant daughter. Now, like Interview with a Vampire, Meyer tries to put some supernatural boundaries on it to remove the creepy pedophilia aspect that initially everyone comes to mind with. She tries to retcon it to say that, well, no, it's not a sexual attraction to an infant. He loves her, and his love for her changes as she grows, which doesn't quite hit the mark. And she also tries the disgust factor that we saw in the Interview with a Vampire example, where when Bella comes to and she's all vamped out and better and not with a broken spine or whatever, comes to meet her daughter and she sees Jacob and she realizes that he's imprinted on her. Her go-to reaction, based on what she knows about imprinting, is rage and seeks to attack him. And they try to explain to her all the BS that I just did with the, well, no, it's like it's a protective love at first, and he's her confidant and friend as she grows up, and then when she's an adult, his love will change for her, and that's when the sexual attraction starts. Oh, and she'll be an adult in 8 years, so don't worry, it's not going to be awkward forever. What? Like, there was just so much about all of the elements that Meyer tried to incorporate into this to make it work that it just didn't work. And I think looking at the 2 examples, we can see some major differences as to why. The person who is initiating the adult-child relationship in this case is the adult. And it's towards someone who, when we first meet the character, is a literal newborn. No. And then she goes in with this, their love changes, so it's okay for him to be around her bit, and it doesn't really sell, and it sounds almost like grooming, which plays more into the pedophilia aspect as opposed to less. So this didn't have the same reaction that the Interview with a Vampire audience did. The die-hard apologetic fans really bought into all of the grooming mentality and just accepted it at face value, kind of like they did with a lot of the codependent, abusive behaviors that Edward displayed toward Bella. So these are not the people that are going to necessarily want to be the barometer for whether or not that sort of relationship is going to be presentable to a mass audience. Because the mass audience, when both book and film viewers got to that point, a lot of them stepped back, myself included, because it was super creepy, and it just was the icing on the problematic cake. And so given the amount of backlash that Meyer and the production companies received, even though they still made lots of money on opening weekends from the diehard fans, given the amount of problematic hoop jumping that they had to do to overcome the overwhelming disgust from the larger community, I do not think they're going to try that with Rin and SESSHOUMARU. Because again, this would have to be a case where SESSHOUMARU, the adult, took a child, groomed her, and then made her his bride as a child. And that is not going to go over well. Not in this current climate, and really not ever, because if this were something like the Interview with a Vampire case, the immortal would have to be Rin, who would have to have an adult mentality, and then her relationship with SESSHOUMARU would change at that aspect. Now, I suppose they could try it where, they really try to age up Kohaku to put him in his maybe late 40s, but given how young they have made him appear, I doubt it. So that, maybe the only way I could see this really working would be for Rin to have left SESSHOUMARU's care for a considerable amount of time and then come back as an adult, a completely different person, and started a new relationship with him, essentially from scratch. And I really don't think that that's going to happen, given the type of person that we saw SESSHOUMARU to be in the series. He was very possessive. Things that he thought were his, he fought and was willing to kill even his own brother for, namely the swords. So someone that he would consider his, being Rin, I don't think he would just let her go, even though he doesn't outwardly appear to be an emotional person. If he feels ownership or responsibility for her, I don't think he would just let her go off and live her own life and then come back at a later date. So I don't really see that the relationship, if they try to go that route, being well met. And considering the amount of panic that the internet has had with just the potential of this, I'm going to say that both me and the imaginary production team for the Yashahime Demon Half Princess revamp also saw this as problematic, and I don't think that this is going to be the case. So then, who is SESSHOUMARU's baby mama, you ask? Well, thank you, and that is something that I've asked myself. And once again, I turn to popular series that share similar fantastical elements to see where they could maybe go with this. And the answer, my friends, lies in Legend of Korra. So, in the original Avatar series, we have our main cast, Team Avatar, Aang, Sokka, Katara, and Toph. Now, as they grow older, we see some of the older living characters and then their children as they take on new roles and new plot lines in Legend of Korra. So we don't see Aang because Aang is deceased. Obviously, that's kind of how the show works. We see Tenzin and the other children of Aang as their adult lives progress and deal with the more adult conflicts and political aspects of the series that Legend of Korra takes. And we also see the children of Toph. And we see that Toph's two daughters, much like SESSHOUMARU's two daughters, share different aspects of their main character parent, but are vastly different in personality, much like SESSHOUMARU's two children. And I think, much like Toph, SESSHOUMARU is just going to have some nameless NPC type characters be the parents to his children, not unlike Toph. So for those who didn't watch the Korra series, everybody was waiting to find out as they got more and more into the Beifong family history with Lin and Su and, their family dynamics, and we got flashbacks into their earlier lives, but we never saw their dads, and it was driving us nuts. So luckily, we have our dum-dum himbo Bolin one day just outright asked Toph at a campfire, so who's their dads? Who's her dad? And the entire cast chokes, and Toph's answer is just great. She's like, I don't know, some guy. I think his name was Lee. He was nice enough, but I got bored, so he left. And I feel like that's going to be the case with SESSHOUMARU, because a lot like Toph, SESSHOUMARU doesn't have a lot of deeply emotional attachments to people. Toph cares about her family, and she cared about Team Avatar, but she wasn't the lovey-dovey type. She wasn't really into romance. She wasn't caught up in all of the... she would be aromantic, would be how I would classify her, and that would kind of go along the lines with how I would classify SESSHOUMARU, maybe not being asexual, but being aromantic. And so if this were the case, it would make a lot of sense for them to go with the Toph Beifong route, where the mother of SESSHOUMARU's children is just some nameless human that entertained him for a short time, and then when he got bored, he left. That seems very much in line with SESSHOUMARU's character, being the fluffy, cold, heartless sociopath that we all know and love. Just like it did for Toph. She wanted a family, she found someone who could give her children, and then when she got bored with them, she left. Because she's not a deeply emotional person who really cares about people. She's very distant, much like SESSHOUMARU. So, mystery solved. I guess I'll have to come back and do like a reaction video when this comes out in September, which is in just a few weeks. So hopefully my predictions are not wrong. Hopefully the show creators are not gross, because I would be very, 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 very disappointed in them if they did. So yeah, I don't know if this is so much more an angry nerd rant as it is an angry nerd conspiracy. But I was angry at the showrunners for teasing that and getting the internet all up in a tizzy, because with all of the hoopla that's going on, and especially for the American audience who is dealing with a lot of issues surrounding child trafficking, pedophilia, and child abuse, to tease that into what is often considered an escape for a lot of us in the geek community, escaping into anime and manga and video games. You go there to remove yourself from the current event problems of the world. So to insert that as an underlying issue, even just as a teaser to build up hype and drama and hashtag and following and trending, it's a really crummy thing to do, and I really hope that they don't follow through on it. I don't think they will, given that the last attempt at this type of relationship being portrayed to a global audience went horribly, and the amount of work it takes to frame such a relationship in that it becomes successful and framing it as problematic is, I don't think, something they wanted to spend a lot of time on, and I don't think is the point of this series. It's supposed to be about the kids and their adventures and the next generation of the series, not unlike Legend of Korra. So I think they're going to follow the Legend of Korra mapping, in which we see characters that we know who were maybe secondary or background characters from the original series, like with Kohaku, and we may see some of the original characters like Inuyasha or SESSHOUMARU in their older states, but the primary focus is going to be on the children and their adventures, with the parental figures, if any are left around, sort of being advisors and ties and anchors to the original series. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Definitely give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I am hoping to come back with more videos on a more regular basis once my treatments start up again next week. Fingers crossed that I will have more energy and time and not broken equipment to make wonderful videos for you, my lovelies. Luckily, the tripod that broke was just my teeny tiny like handheld one that I used to prop my phone up on tables and stuff to do videos like in my infusion center, so that's going to be problematic. But luckily, all my nice fancy equipment that my partner bought me to help support me and make these videos for you is nicely saved and packed away downstairs where I can't break it. So yeah. Thank you so much for watching, my lovelies. I will see you all next time.